Hello and welcome to the OmniGamersClub podcast, the podcast about games on all platforms, including waiting in line to pay at IKEA. My name is Mark USA.
And my name is Daniel Winter. How are you, Mark?
Yeah, I'm okay. I mean, the weekend just passed
Mm-hmm.
in an instant, of course, without really doing much, but that's how it goes these days.
We just had a very rare thunderstorm here in Vancouver. I don't know if you heard any of that over there. So if we suddenly crash out, you'll know why.
Yeah, I did hear it, and I didn't know. I wasn't quite for sure. I thought it was my neighbor playing their subwoofer really
The
loud.
fireworks going off again. Yeah.
Exactly. You can never tell in this city, especially in the neighborhood where I live. But I noticed once I saw the flashing that that had to be thunder or lightning.
Very, very, very exciting. That's what counts for news around here. Well, speaking
There
of
you go.
news, this is the playlist where we talk about all the other games we've been playing and some of them are current topics. Though I think we're a little light on news this episode. A lot of distractions on other things happening in the world. Who knows? I guess. So we'll be a little brief today. Hey, we'll maybe keep this a short episode. We'll see how that goes. So, Mark, what's news to you lately?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of news to speak about, except that I spent a bit of time reading today, and I was reading through one of the issues of Weird Science. You yourself kindly lent me a couple of issues of Weird Science. That is, of course, the kind of indie magazine about mostly indie RPGs, which is quite enjoyable. I've been liking that a lot. And I also bought I think I bought a bundle of the issues digitally
Yes.
on Drive Through RPG.
Yeah, it's a
So
good
you can
deal right
find,
now for back
yeah,
issues. I can't read PDFs. I have to have the physical artifact. But hey, if you've got a good option for that, then absolutely pick up that bundle.
yeah, absolutely. On a large screen iPad, it's fantastic. You can zoom, you can take notes. It's excellent. But anyways, that's all to say that I was reading an interesting piece about. I think it was in the Session Zero episode about a company called Games Omnivorous, and the name
Hmm.
really stood out to me, because our podcast is called the Omni
Yes.
Gamers Club, so it sort of fit in that whole wide open palette for games theory. And the article is really interesting, but I went and checked out their website, and that I noticed that they had a bunch of cool products. And I think they're a Portuguese team, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
And they've done a lot of collaborations with other indie studios. They created a physical box set of the popular indie game RPG called Mausritter.
Oh
And
yes, of
that
course.
one looks very attractive. And I
Hmm.
don't think that game had a physical release before this box
Hmm.
set. I think it was only digital, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, the box set looks fantastic. They've done collabos with the Morkborg people. Of course, everyone's got to, create a Morkborg um, expansion or release related title. But the one cool thing that I saw on their website was something called, I think it's called like the Hex Toolkit,
Hmm.
and it's basically a tool specifically made for doing hex crawls. We talked about hex crawls loosely in one of the episodes we had previously. It's basically like an RPG where you're kind of traversing like a landscape, like a countryside, and you're trying to make the traversal part of the game. So you don't necessarily know where you're going to be heading. You don't necessarily know, or maybe you know that you're heading to the evil wizard's tower, but you don't know what's in between you and the evil wizard's tower. So normally you would roll against a randomized table, and you would say, in this hex, which is short for hexagon of the hexagonal grid, you would encounter a swamp or something like that. And normally this is done very, very lo-fi, just on paper with pens and ink. But in this case, I'll share the link for it in the
Hmm.
notes. But they're selling a package which is basically like individual, if you will, like Carcassonne tiles.
Oh
But
wow.
each of them, not Carcassonne, what are they called?
Katana.
Catan.
Okay.
Catan
Yeah,
tiles. That's what
I
I'm
knew
thinking
what
of.
you meant.
Yeah, exactly. Individual Catan tiles, but instead of all of the fields being just normal fields, each of them has a different kind of biome, and then
Hmm.
they'll have a unique highlight on that biome. So it could be a tower, it could be a crypt, it could be an abandoned church, it could be a village, it could be a bog, it could be a swamp, it could be a copse of trees, something like that. So you put these tiles in a bag, you reach into that bag and you pull the tile out and you place it, and then you move your miniatures along that map, and it's very like toyetic, very kind of visually interesting, and kind of board game like.
Interesting.
And since you and I obviously like our board games, and very instantly know that feel of placing down those Catan tiles, this seemed very interesting to me. So that product exists right now. It's called the Hex Toolkit, I believe. But they have just announced they're just releasing a backer kit campaign for an expansion to this called the Boreal Frostlands. And in this case, this is all in the cold, wintry climes. And the backer kit actually the campaign hasn't started yet. It's starting tomorrow, which would be November 18th, according to when
by the time
we're
you're listening to
recording.
this, it would have started.
It will have started,
Yeah.
but I'm saying this to say I actually don't know all the details. But there's some screenshots. The art looks really, really evocative, and it's supposed to be system neutral. So you should be able to play this with like any system that you have going on, that is fantasy oriented. And the artwork just looks really delightful. Has some kind of like whimsical artwork that's like a little bit not totally grimdark. But a little bit of a kind of Arkham twist to it. Lovely color design. Anyway, go check it out. You can get there from the game's Omnivorous website, or you can just search for Boreal Frostlands.
I'll also just drop the link in the show notes. So there you go.
There you go.
Yeah,
Go check it out.
I'm curious to check out some HexCrawl systems. I'm not familiar with that sort of sub genre, but I do love the idea of exploring and exploration, that super procedurally generated map, and how games can play with that. I think we've spoken a little bit about Cloud Empress, which I believe uses that system. Yeah, I'm not sure how well the sort of system agnostic map would apply to other games, but curious to look into that.
I think it absolutely could work, because really what you're hoping for is just like randomization, right? Like the GM should be able to handle an encounter in like a bog versus a encounter at a temple or something like that. It's just basically mixing things up and making it more visceral for the players. And what happens at the scenario can be exciting for everyone playing.
Twisting the tone to whatever the setting or system that you're playing, I guess. It's like it might be a cathedral in that tile, but how creepy is that cathedral?
Yeah, and just keeping it exciting and keeping it spontaneous. I'm all for that. But truth be told, I haven't played a lot of systems that utilize it in depth. I know that there's a really popular PDF product. It's available in zine form as well, but it's called the Sandbox Generator System. So you can find it on DriveThruRPG. I'm looking at just one of the PDFs myself. Sandbox Generator. There's like 6-7 different expansions for it, and it is also system agnostic. So I guess it's a sort of tool to help you build like a HexCrawl system. So there's lots of tools out there. There's lots of systems in there, and thankfully you can integrate it into any game that you're playing.
Very neat. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Mausritter there too, which is another one I've been quite interested in. There was that really fascinating story in the Wyrd Science about how they had basically opened it up to sort of third-party development, and there's a huge catalog of all the missions and quests or sort of settings, I guess, that people have built for that system. It sounds really interesting, because it's not just another sort of Redwall-ish game with like mice acting as if they're sort of medieval sort of warriors and villagers and whatnot. There's also a sense of them. They compared it to Roadside Picnic or sort of Stalker, that sort of sense of mice and other creatures living in the wreckage of a human world. Whether that world is still existing or has passed on is sort of up for some ambiguity there. But I found that really interesting. The sort of mice sort of almost performing archaeology on human artifacts.
Right,
and apparently
who remain.
System based on Into the Odd, which I happen to have on hand here, a very sort of weird fiction setting, which I haven't had a chance to read into yet, but that's high on my list to check out as well.
Very cool. Yeah, Mausritter I haven't played myself, but that kind of mice in tiny creatures in a big person's world is very popular. Obviously, on the board game side, there's Mice and Mystics.
Everdell.
There's so many instances of it. For some reason, it's a very kind of evergreen subgenre there. I guess it's like unlicensed, so
Big people made
anyone
little,
can.
little people made big. Always an evergreen.
There you go. All right, how about yourself? Do you have any news to tell?
Yeah, just one quick release I wanted to shout out. It's a Kickstarter right now that I've actually had the chance to try. This isn't. I've been distancing myself from Kickstarter previews for various reasons in terms of the difficulty in Kickstarter coverage. But there's a game I managed to try at PAX Unplugged last year. That is Lairs from Kids Table Board Games. So this is sort of Burnt Island Games, a sort of imprint for family weight games with a slightly smaller scale. So this is basically a two-player. I think it's two players only. They might have plans for stretching it out, but ideally two players only, where you each have a grid. Say a 5x5 grid of basically a dungeon. Each square of this grid being a room, and you're given a certain number of components that basically act as walls and treasure and monsters that you're going to place in a dungeon. So you each player has their own dungeon that they're creating simultaneously behind a screen. You're custom building a dungeon, and then once you're done, you pass it to your opponent, and they have to try and proceed through that dungeon. And basically, I think from memory, it's basically you say that you want to go north or you want to go west, for example, and tell your opponent whether you find a monster or whether you hit a wall, and you're trying to find treasure. So there's a little bit of deduction there, but it's also just that player creation, I think, is always a lot of fun. I have very fun memories of playing. I think it was a Game Boy game. I can never recall the name of it. It was a weird sci-fi 2D side scroller. This is like OG Game Boy. My cousins and I would build our own custom maps and then pass it around to each other, and just I'm sure there's lots of games that do that, but custom map creation, not something I've really lent into, but as a communal exercise is really fun. So yeah, I'm really curious to see how that develops. There's some fun ideas in stretch goals and like I think hidden envelopes that I haven't picked at yet. So they're going to roll out some various secrets in that dungeon. So that's Lairs from Kids Table Board Games.
Very cool. Sounds like an interesting product. One more tiny piece of news since we're talking about backer kit. I spoke in previous episodes about Mothership Month, saying it's Gabo, Gabo is coming, and
Well, he's here.
I announced it eagerly. Well, I think my exact words were cautiously optimistic. I did check it out. I'm not terribly blown away, but by what I see there, I'm not saying any of it is good or bad. I think it's just a little overwhelming, like we were concerned about, both you and I, as a product. You've played Mothership. I have not. I'm interested in Mothership. And, they do offer the base rules for Mothership for free in zine form, which I really highly, praise. They've done fantastic work. Tuesday Night Games has really kind of led a movement here with Mothership, obviously. So much so that they have 20 or so creators that have put their works up all in this coordinated fashion. I think they're calling it a backer train. Basically, they have these extra bonus prizes that you can unlock if you buy a certain number. So you buy 5, you get one package, and if you buy 8, you get another package or something like that.
Except those are loot boxes. There's some degree of randomization there. It's like a random pack of cards. You don't know exactly what you're getting. It's like FOMO mixed with sort of uncertainty of what you're actually getting. I don't love that, to be honest. We don't need more of those trends in board games or tabletop games.
I don't know if it's specifically randomized product or not. I don't know if they are. They might just be in those kind of booster style packages,
that's what I mean.
Which some games do.
Yeah.
But just for myself, it was quite overwhelming. There was only really a couple of products I was interested in, including the base a Mothership game in the physical form, and then there's the official Wages of Sin book that Tuesday Night Games was promoting, and basically it's over, I think it's around $150 Canadian to get those two in physical form, and more probably shipped out to us. So that's just a whole lot to chew, a whole lot to bite off and chew all at once as a newcomer. And then add on all those other examples, you don't even know what you're wading through there. They're all various different designs, different designers, different approaches, and there are all these kind of add-ons to a central system, obviously. But it's just trying to drink through a fire hose. I don't know if this format is great for promoting any of those individual pieces. And
Yeah.
I don't know how well it's working from a business side. Maybe it's doing great for the creators.
Yeah, I mean, I had a look at the landing page and very quickly got overwhelmed. I hadn't looked into any of the individual projects yet. Obviously, this is for the super fans, right? For the people who already know and love
Right.
Mothership and want more. Is a lot of work to go through each of those projects one at a time. The layout of the backer kit sort of landing page wasn't great. I think it was just hard to get a summary of what you're looking at there. But yeah, I'd probably just keep it simple and just grab the base Mothership kit for now. Personally, I don't need a dozen different miscellaneous missions and things. I have heard, for what it's worth, that the GM guide, I think it is, in base Mothership is really strong as a broad concept of suggestions for new GMs. Apparently, lots of good tips in there. But that base Mothership kit, like, you can just get that and not worry about all these other.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not poo-pooing the game of Mothership at all. I'm still very excited to play it and very excited to own it. I'm just more concerned that this format for kind of selling you on a whole bunch of separate projects at once is a lot to take in, and really kind of pushed me a bit away.
This is the encouragement of having to buy 24 different things without being able, like, the inability to do all the research fully, all of those items. Like, there's a lot of information to take in, and meanwhile FOMO is pushing at you, just get all of them, go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as for myself, I'm going to resist it. But congratulations to all the creators. I think all 21 projects are already funded
Great, yeah.
5 days in. And obviously, there's a lot of time to go. And probably lots of people are super excited about this, and they're going to get exactly what they want. So
yeah, I don't begrudge indie creators their success. I wish there was an easier way of doing this. Really, I'm tired.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of cool to let for Tuesday Night Games to let a bunch of creators kind of ride on their coattails, and it's really promoting them, which is in turn great for the ecosystem, right?
Yes,
so
yeah.
it all helps those creators. So maybe it's a great idea from that direction.
Absolutely.
But for me, maybe not so much. Anyhow, what do you think? Is there more news you had?
No, as I said, there's a couple of other topics we might discuss at the end if we're running real short in time. But let's see where we get. A few other games to discuss.
Let's keep going. All right, you want to tell us about some video games you've been playing?
Sure. Yeah. So I was really fascinated this last year. One of the very first games I ever played, baby me, with my NES. I think I was 6 years old. Had a game called Ufouria the Saga. So this was called Hebereke, I think was the original Japanese title. There was a few spin-off titles, but they didn't. None of them ever got a North American release, and only that initial one got a release in Europe and Australia, where I played it. And so this was a fascinating little sort of proto Metroidvania, where it's a sort of open world game. You've got various obstacles that you can't get past, but instead of unlocking new abilities, you basically unlock new characters. Like you have these, I think your friends have been sort of corrupted, and you have to beat them in a fight, and then you get to switch to that character very dynamically. Like, hit a button, you switch to that character, and suddenly they have different abilities. They can jump higher, or they can climb walls, etc. And so, yeah, I have a lot of fun memories with that game, playing it with my dad growing up. And then out of the blue, this last year, Ufouria the Saga 2 was announced 33 years after the original game. So I'm not sure what the logic there was. I'm assuming there's a lot of nostalgia for this in Japan, probably. There were at least several spin-offs. Like, there was a fighting game and like a bubble game, I think. So yeah, I had been eyeing this off, and finally my dad is actually visiting right now, and looking for a new game to play with my daughter. And so we dove into Ufouria 2, and not a lot has changed. It's basically the same characters, very similar concept, exactly the same music. I have to say, like, that like takes me straight back to 6 years old. Lot of nostalgic memories there. So this is a very easy game, I will say. It's like it's a 2D platformer, side scroller. It has a very sort of old school, very heavy platforming. Like, you jump and you barely move, and like your player moves like a brick, basically, but not particularly difficult. Like, most of the enemies basically operate like Goombas, just slowly walking towards you. You jump on them, move and so on. A lot of coins to collect. Curiously, it does the game isn't entirely open world. It has these segmented areas that it's constantly funneling you back into. Like you'll go to the end of a chain or go to the end of a branch and then have to return back to the start, and you have to go back along that branch again. But now you've got the ability that will let you continue on to the next one. So it's constantly sending you back to the middle. It's like a sort of hub and spoke. Except it's constantly sending you back to the middle of the spoke to return out again. But each time you go through each of those areas, it's slightly different. It's like semi-procedurally generated. Not like it doesn't drastically change. It's just slightly different enough to keep things interesting. And they always give you this little mini mission, like, oh, if you don't get hit on this level, you'll get some extra coins. If you kill 3 enemies, you get extra coins. Again, none of this is difficult in any way, really, but it's just slightly little breadcrumbs to keep you slightly engaged, especially when you're repeating the same level over and over again. So, again, it's probably not going to be super engaging if you don't have that nostalgic value that I do. So maybe this is for a very slim audience. But my daughter really loves it. It's got like a great sense of character. There's like these 4 different playable characters that all feel different. They all have different abilities. It's basically all created like arts and crafts style, like sort of Yoshi's Woolly World or was it Kirby's Epic Yarn? It's very much pulling on that aesthetic where it looks like it's all like sort of felt and perla beads and sort of handcrafted. So that's very cute, and my daughter loves it. She's tried playing it a little bit herself. I don't think she's quite there yet, but it's a great entry level game if you've got young kids or some nostalgia there.
That's really cool. A blast from the past. Yeah, I can't say I played that intensely, although I had a NES at the time. But I think the box art, I must have like rented that game once from the video store around the corner, which is something you could do back then. Oh, 30 or more years ago.
Curiously, I did just see that I think there's actually a Steam and a Switch version of the original that's come out in the last few months. Let me double check that. Hebereke Enjoy Edition. So it's by the original Japanese title, and I think it's like actually translated from the original Japanese edition rather than the like Australian edition, which is slightly different. So when did that come out? March 2024. So yeah,
it's like
that is still available.
It's like Macross versus Robotech. That's kind of cool. Very nice. Very cool. Speaking of retro games, I've been playing a little bit more of Octopath Traveler 2.
Yes, yep.
And I told you, I think, after our last in-person game session that the third character I ran into was the samurai, the kind of faux Japan character. He's like a princeling or something like that. And just got him passed. So I passed the third prologue, and then the party of 3 characters is together finally. And I think I told you on a previous episode that just adding the second character added so many more play options, and adding the third character adds even more play options, as you might imagine, because you can load them up with different weapons. The enemies are weak versus certain type of weapons, so you can mix and match. They have their secondary abilities, so the sort of the world of it is opening up, and I'm really enjoying that in the bits and bytes that I'm playing it for. And I really like some of the quality of life improvements as well, the ability to like speed up some of the cutscenes and just pass through certain things, like just explainers that are really kind of light tutorial information there. It's just a smart game and a well executed game, and I think it's a solid title. And just the fact that it's keeping my interest over the weeks is a good sign for RPGs for me.
Yeah, I since booted this back up since you last talked about it, and I hadn't realized I was like 90% of the way through the second character, which was the same sort of first 2 characters that you had chosen, the huntress and the scholar, I think it was. And I just finished my third today, but I did the priest. I can't remember what his official title is, but yeah, it's a great game. It doesn't really do anything new in terms of mechanics, like you're balancing enemy weaknesses. It's got the whole, I think, Bravely Default sort of I don't know if they created it, but popularized this mechanic where you can basically double down and you build up these little pips that you can spend, do a really powerful turn basically, or you can bank them or use them immediately.
there's the break ability, so you basically hit an
Yeah,
enemy
well, that's like
with
tied
one of
into
their
the
weaknesses.
weaknesses. Yeah.
That's like very much the same, Persona does that, obviously, where you can basically like pause them, you can stun them, and
Mm,
that gives you like additional turns in a row, right? If this
yeah.
was a board game or something like that. So you can be very, very strategic about how you play out
It
these
does feel
games,
like
and
a puzzle, like
solid.
breaking them at the right time, and just like some of your abilities will hit double and break 2 levels of their break shield, and yeah, it's a few different layers going on there. Nothing new, but it does it in a very satisfying, puzzly way.
Yeah.
I will say the pacing just grinds to a halt every time you unlock a new character. And on the one hand, at least you know there's 8 of them. You know what you're in for at the start of the game. You know that it's going to take a while. You can come back to it later. But I figured, like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to get around to it. But at the same time, you finally you finish a prologue. You finally feel like the character is like starting to build up, get some new abilities, become more interesting, and then suddenly, oh, new character. Let's reset ground to square one again. And so the pacing is a little much there, and all 3 stories so far have been like completely different. There's no like every character has their own storyline, their own goals. There's no real sense of what's bringing them together. I'm guessing there's going to be they're all connected. There's going to be some level
Yeah.
of that. But right now, like, why are you guys working together? What are you doing? I don't.
They're going to bring it all together. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, I pretty much agree with all your points there. It is a change of pace. It's sort of
Mm.
like in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where they go off into Mongolia for half of the movie. It's sort of like that. It's like, why did you tell a whole different movie in the middle of this movie I was already watching? And in the end, they bring the characters together. I sort of felt like it's a bit like a tabletop RPG, actually. You
Hmm.
let some characters come into focus more this session compared to that one. In the next session, you're going to focus more on that one, and it builds the background, right? It's not such a linear story. All these, I don't know, really, really boring kind of dime a dozen JRPGs have these really safe kind of standard stories, and this one is like totally off the wall because, as you say, all the characters are different. It's like you got 8 different creators and you told them to write 8 different stories, and somehow you're going to weave it together. And I think that's actually exciting. Like there's not that many games that do that. I know that obviously Octopath 1 did that, and games like Live Alive, I believe, was one of the earliest originators of
Yeah.
that concept as well.
Mm. And the writing has been fairly good so far, from what I've seen. It's not like, again, not groundbreaking, but it's solid from my experience with JRPGs. And that's for like, but you get right to the end of a story and you feel like you're hooked. Okay, I'm invested in these characters, and they're gone. So I
Well, you're just going to get to
yeah,
see those characters in a new
yeah,
light.
gotta push through.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see if the game continues to keep our interest.
Mhm.
How about yourself? More video games you've been playing?
Yeah, one other one I want to quickly mention. One of my favorite games from the last few years, it was Void Bastards. So that was a really fascinating exploration of sort of roguelike elements, but basically with immersive sim mechanics, where you sort of booted into these little mini sandbox levels with a scattering of the sort of hacking materials and security things and different guns with strange mechanics. And each level is sort of very self-contained and semi-randomized. But if you die, it doesn't. You don't kick back to the start of their campaign. Basically, it prints off a new clone where with like semi-randomized attributes, and you just continue the same campaign, same sense of progression, but with a different character. And so it was a good level of sort of the resetting with roguelike without losing all your sense of progress. It had a very clear arc. Like a campaign was like 10 hours, I think. So you could still make progress even when you're dying. Yeah, long story short. I love that game, but I never really heard anyone talking about it. It never seems to get much sort of hype. But so I was very surprised when it got a sequel this last year, just a couple of months ago, I think, called Wild Bastards. So this basically kicks it into space with sort of Western aesthetics, space cowboys, that old chestnut. Except it's a lot of like robots and sort of cyberpunk elements in there as well. It's a little different from Void Bastards, and it's kind of like, let me think. FTL, I think, was the game, or Slay the Spire, where you've basically got this sort of zoomed out level with a series of nodes, or a map of nodes, and you're moving between the nodes, and each one has an event or an encounter of some kind. And then some of those encounters will zoom into a level which has a secondary degree of nodes, which is like a map of the planet, and you're moving between shops and combat encounters. And then finally, you'll zoom into one of those combat encounters, and each one of those is like this little sandbox shoot 'em up. It's a first-person shooter, but it's much more fast-paced than the sort of immersive sim elements. So basically, you're switching between characters. I think it's ultimately like 9, but you take, say, 2 or 3 characters into a level, and you can switch between them with the click of a button. Instead of switching guns, you're switching completely different characters that have different loadouts that feel slightly different. They all have different equipment to mix up their feel quite a bit. So yeah, I'm enjoying that. It does feel like some of those combats are over a little fast. Like you drop in with all this pomp loading into a new map. It counts down till the shoot down starts, and suddenly you shoot 2 enemies and it's over. Load back out again. So I'm starting to get a little deeper in, where they're getting a little more involved, and the enemies are getting more aggressive and more unique effects, and you have to really think about how you're countering those. So yeah, it's quite interesting so far. It's quite punishing. I've died a few times, and I don't have a great feel yet for how much that's setting me back, because you have to like restart some of the levels, and there's like 5 different currencies that you're managing, and I'm not sure how those all tie in together yet. But it's got a great aesthetic. It's very sort of Mike Mignola, the Hellboy aesthetic, with some really, like, all the characters have a very sort of unique vibe and design, and it all feel like very fleshed out characters with very different playstyle and characterization. So enjoying that so far. It's a little confusing, a lot of systems it's layering onto each other, which doesn't really explain itself very well, but great vibes. So enjoying that so far.
That's cool. So when you swap out the character, do you like persist in that character, or do they just come in for like one attack or something?
No,
like
well,
that?
you can just be, you can switch back and forth however much you like. Each character has their own health bar, basically. So if you're playing as Rosa, and she's lost all of her health, she's about to die, you can switch to your other character, like Smokey is one of them, and suddenly your health is back to full. He's got a different weapon, different mechanics.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's quite dynamic, and they each have their own like ultimate, basically, so you can switch back and forth, which is more useful.
That was reminding me a little bit of this game that I played briefly called Eiyuden Chronicles Rising.
Oh yes, yeah.
That's the 2D side scroller action RPG one. So basically, you can swap out between 3 heroes that you have with you, and only one of them's on screen at a time. But when you press a different attack button, they swap out to the other one, and you can stay as that character for a while until you choose to swap out to another one as well. So
funnily, Ufouria, same system. So a lot of dynamic character switching today.
See, there was a theme to this episode after all. Very cool. All right, I'm going to talk about a game that I played for a little bit as well, called totally different genre this time. It's called Terminator Resistance, which I had to look second at that at the second part of the title, because it's very generic sounding and sounds like something that's been out for a long time. But no, it's a relatively new-ish game in the Terminator film universe. And in this case, you are like in the future. Or so far, I have only been in the future. I haven't visited the 1980s or any time in the
John
past.
Connor timeline?
Yes, haven't met John Connor yet. And just this kind of resistance fighter in the Resistance, thus the name Resistance. Makes a lot of sense. And so far, this game, it's doing some kind of cool stuff, but at other times it's doing stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, for some reason, this game is very 10 years ago. It's very, it uses a lot of design mechanisms from 10, 15 years ago. Like, it's got, for some reason, you have like Batman Arkham Asylum, like detective vision, and you can see through walls, which would have been really useful for, I don't know, for a Kyle Reese to have or something when he was fighting against the Terminator. So you can see the, all the different types of hunter killers, robots. You're not just fighting against T-800s, you're fighting against like these little like walkie insect drones as well. So there's a nice variety of enemies that you fight. And actually, I guess the second mission that I got to play after getting through the tutorial involved me rescuing some survivors. So there was some cool aspects as well. You're sort of like building up resistance base early on in the game and building up equipment, collecting crafting materials, and building, tools and power-ups and items to take out. So very, very traditional, very, once again, safe. It's not like super blowing me away, but I'll probably keep playing it a little bit. But just word of warning, it does feel very retro. I guess the reason why I wanted to play this is because I was in a little bit of a Terminator mood. I watched the Netflix anime Terminator Zero, which is like not about John Connor at all. It's about like when Skynet comes live, which is of course not canonical because obviously they change the timeline every time. So it's a new period at which Skynet comes alive. And then right along that, I finished that brief series. I think it's only 8 or 10 episodes, short episodes. And then I watched Terminator Genesis because I was sort of in a mood to watch some of the later ones, which I haven't watched the later ones. And it turns out that I had watched this one before. It's so generic. The later series Terminators movies are so generic that I can't even remember that I watched them. But I did watch this one. It's with Khaleesi from Game of Thrones,
yes.
who's playing Sarah Connor, and young
Emilia
Sarah
Clarke.
Connor. Yes, that's right. And it's got, of course, Arnold, old Arnold. And actually, I really like Arnold in this one. He does a great job. He's really cute as this kind of like huggable, even more huggable T-800, because not only is he a cute little droid protector, but he's old now, so he's got the additional charm. But I really want to watch the new one that's got Lyndall Hamilton back as older Lyndall Hamilton, but it's not on the streaming services, so sad for me. I didn't get to watch it.
Yeah, I've not seen anything beyond 2. I know that IP has had pretty tumultuous few years with the various incarnations. They keep coming back to that well, though. They can't help themselves.
They sure do. Well, it's just a license, right? They just like recycle and recycle because it's a story that's meant to be recycled, right? Because they literally wipe the timeline every time.
I heard that the TV show, the Sarah Connor Chronicles,
yes.
I heard was solid. I've not seen that.
I really like the Sarah Connor Chronicles. I thought they did some exciting stuff. It has, what's her face from Firefly in it, who was great as a Terminator, and it also had another Game of Thrones star. Basically, what's her face was playing Sarah Connor, who played Cersei. Lena Headey.
Yes.
Lena Headey, I believe, is her name.
Cool.
She was really good at Sarah Connor there. And there's some great side stories, some great lore stuff happening in Sarah Connor Chronicles. I did not watch 3, but I did watch the one that was with Batman.
I honestly don't know how many movies there have been at this point.
A ton. But this isn't Terminator movie talk. This is video game and other game talk. So I guess, long story short, I was in a Terminator mood. Maybe I'll play a little bit more of Resistance, but it's not...
You're not selling it too hard there.
No. It's not winning any awards for me. That's for sure.
Okay.
All right.
Well, shall we jump to the tabletop side?
Yeah, let's do it. Why don't you talk? Because I think the other game was something that you and I played together.
Yeah, we both did play a game that I think we're going to save for a featured episode, so stay tuned for that. But I did play a pretty large game. It's been on my shelf of shame for a while. You've probably seen it behind me here. All these episodes are Tidal Blades. Top shelf game. Does not fit on a regular Kallax shelf. So this... It was unfortunately a casualty of the sort of early lockdown period where it was one of the first Kickstarters to arrive during that period. And so it just sort of got pushed to the back of the pile. I played it solo and it was quite an engaging experience there. But this last week I finally got to play it multiplayer in person in anticipation of Tidal Blades 2, which I just received. But more on that when I get to try it. So Tidal Blades 1, I can't even remember this. There's like a subtitle for it. I'm not going to try and remember that. This is basically it's kind of a worker placement game. The theme is the monsters are coming, which you'll be fighting in Tidal Blades 2. But for now, you're training and trying to prepare yourself for the monsters. And so this is sort of this series of trials, semi cooperative / competitive competition where you're trying to train in order to fight the monsters. So you're going to these various locations to collect resources and then do these challenges. Each challenge basically rolling a series of dice, trying to match symbols to that challenge to then upgrade your attributes. And the attributes, there's like 4 attributes you have that match the dice, but also have a pretty unique effect. Like one of them increases the number of character cards, and character cards will give you sort of unique bonuses. One will increase the number of dice you can roll. But it's basically, all 4 of those attributes have a pretty big impact on the game, and so you really, it's not just an arbitrary number, is what I'm saying. There's a really clear impact to wanting to upgrade all of them, and you're going to have to probably choose between 1 or 2. Really excruciating decision. So at the same time, there are some monsters to fight, sort of a little tease to the next game. There's some monsters coming in each round that you want to attack, but you have to collectively fight them. Basically, you're rolling dice to match symbols on the monster, but no one person is going to be able to defeat them. So you're basically banking the dice on there and covering up some of their symbols and then hoping the next person comes in to finish them off. So there's a really fascinating level of semi-cooperation where you kind of have to work together, but you also want to be the one getting the final blow because you get an extra benefit. It does create really interesting dynamics in sort of trying to cooperate. You might come up with some deals. You get some light deal making, but also some sort of that sense of sort of braggadociousness and bragging rights when you kill the monster without it's not directly a competition. You're not like actively fighting. It's a very friendly competition in theme. So I did really enjoy that sort of just the tone of the game that it was setting. It's a very rich world, incredible art from Mr. Cuddington. It's a husband and wife team. It creates really rich, sort of very cartoony world. It's a very great sense of place. Lots of details. I think there's a whole art book that I've got around here somewhere. But lovely components. I do have the big deluxe edition, so it's very overproduced. I will say it's like a giant plastic coliseum that you're rolling the dice into. It's a little bit much, but it's pretty cool for setting the space. It's a very fiddly game in terms of tracking all the damage on the monsters, and some of the upkeep is a little much, but all that fiddliness is in service of a strong theme. I felt I did like the dynamics in terms of that interaction with other players. So yeah, that is Tidal Blades.
That's cool. Yeah, the art has always looked great for that game. I believe there is a tabletop RPG set in that world as well, which I have not played, but obviously they've done a decent amount of world building if there's 2 full board games and role-playing games set in that world as well. So exciting stuff.
Yeah, the second game is like a fully cooperative sort of tactical miniatures game, like players versus monsters, and then there's all at the same time as that there was the RPG was sort of as part of the same Kickstarter.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's kind of rare when you see like a numbered sequel in a board game. So like I can't think of many. Maybe there's like Tikal 2 that I can think of.
Voyages of Marco Polo 2.
Right, like it's kind of exciting, more exciting than in a movie or role-playing game or something like that. When they add a 2 at the end, it's like, wow, that's rare. They must have some confidence in the game. Oh, that's cool. All right. So we're not talking about the other game. We'll keep that a secret for now. We'll cover it in the future. Now, I guess I'll talk a little bit about a role-playing game that I did not play this week. My role-playing game session got canceled, so I wasn't able to play, but I did get some reading in. So I've been trying to figure out, my kid plays D&D, and they've been trying to set up a session, and I wanted to set up something, and they like the kind of the trad fantasy D&D style stuff, but can't really get into it myself. It's just a whole big thing that, it's getting behind Hasbro, right? Not a Hasbro fan. Anyways, big corporation like that. So I've been trying to find like a system to play light kind of trad fantasy in. And OSR seems exciting. There's a lot of buzz going on there, and there's a bunch of systems out there. And because I'm interested, I picked up a couple of zine books. So here are a couple. So here's Cairn, which is just a really short book by Yochai Gal. And here's the white box, which is slightly thicker, but they're both intended to sort of be OSR, old school kind of D&D replacements. So you can be able to play some of those old 70s, 80s style adventures in. And I read through Cairn today, this afternoon, and it's only, what is it? It is including a summary, a one-page summary. All the rules of the game are on this one page. It is 19 pages long. So really brief. You can actually get this. I got this on Amazon for like $5. I don't usually get my RPGs on Amazon, but I just added it on because onto another order. And it's an interesting system, like really lightweight, obviously, rules light, but they've made some interesting choices. Like there's no HP. There is something called HP, but it's protection, and you can lose it, and you can lose it repeatedly. And losing it is actually a way you gain you get more powerful. Your hit protection is reduced to 0, but because it's not your like life points, you actually gain these things called scars. And the scars are, might disfigure you physically. You might get some physical scars on you, but you actually might raise your hit protection in the future because it's showing that you've been banged around. It's showing that you've lived and you fought and you have the scars to show for it. So that part of it is really interesting. It has 3 attributes instead of 6. 3 attributes, very much like a cipher system or something like that. So I just read it today. It's like really quick rolling tables for character generation. You're supposed to create characters really quickly. Your character's going to die. They're just going to die, and that's going to happen. And you're supposed to be able to pick up and keep on playing with those characters. And like the character sheet is actually one of the coolest parts of the design. I like how it's very like graphic, with its icons. Yes. And look how simple that is, almost, right? Yeah. And like a large portion of this book, over 10% of it, is like the spell descriptions. And the spell descriptions are really kind of cool because they're really like uneven. Like some of them are just plain contradictory. Some of them, there's like 3 ones that do roughly the same thing, but one of them is like way more effective. For instance, would you rather have Filch, which allows you to a visible item to teleport to your hands, or would you rather have telekinesis, where you can just manipulate a distant object freely? One of those things seems much more powerful than the other to me. So
one sounds cooler.
Yeah, so there's 100 spells, but the descriptions of them are just like a really brief sentence. So it leaves a lot to the interpretation of the GM and
D&D spells bore me to tears, honestly. Reading through all those stats.
I can't be bothered to read that pseudo-legalese, right? Because they pretend it's so precise. But that either makes it really boring or really difficult to implement, or really dry and mechanical.
Just creating some evocative ideas to let the characters come up with their own.
I'd rather have tools that let people tell stories in interesting ways. And I think that I joke about these really oddly designed descriptions, but I think that they will be fun at the table, right?
Very
unpredictable. Cool. You get some interesting results. Anyways, I haven't played this one yet, but Cairn, it's like $5. Go get it. It's like so quick. Try it out, and you should be able to play some of those old school adventures in it. So
you're looking to GM that with your son?
I'm going to try. Yeah, okay. I would like to try very much. And it's very fast and easy. I would probably just print out the rule book and that one-page rules reference and just kind of go at it. And creating characters would be just part of the session, right?
I have to imagine with something that brief, though, you have to put in quite a lot more effort in creating the actual adventure. There's not much in terms of
not necessarily.
Content there.
You could mix this with some of those HexCrawl tools that we were just mentioning, right? Like you could just be like, you got to get to that tower in the distance, and between here and that tower, you got the wild wastes that you got to go through. So it'd be
compatible with other OSR adjacent content. Interesting.
Yeah, that's right. It even has a brief paragraph at the end that gives you recommendations on how to convert this game into other OSR style games. So I'm intrigued. I haven't played OSR games, so I don't really, other
Mm.
than at TCTC very briefly. But I'm kind of here for them. I don't think they'll ever be my main thing, but it's
Mm.
sort of like a beer and pretzel version of, as opposed to fine dining, right? Like there's definitely a place for that, and I'm open to playing more of it.
Excellent. Well, I've been continuing my journey with solo tabletop RPGs. There's one I picked up on my trip to Scotland, called Delve. It was it had a series of zines at one of the gaming shops over there, and I immediately grabbed this. It was like describes itself as a solo map making sort of dungeon crawler. And reading the back, it's like, I mean, the pictures is full of rooms, dungeon rooms full of dwarves and monsters, and immediately gives off vibes of Dwarf Fortress, which very much seems to be what it's sort of inspired by, in that it's simulating a sort of exploring caverns in a dungeon. You're digging down into a cavern using grid paper. So you like each time you flip a card, you have a regular deck of cards. Flip a card and it'll tell you what type of room, whether it's a mine or a monster hive or a crystal cavern. And so you draw in the room on your map, and then you might flip a card that gives you some resources, and you can build your own buildings into empty caverns. And so there's a lot of push and pull there, with both trying to create your own sort of little dwelling, and then you're recruiting new dwarves and new types of units. There's like a dozen different types of units with different strengths and abilities, but also pushing forward and having to dig down to other areas, which gets more dangerous. You never know what exactly you're going to find. It does. I mean, it's not entirely balanced. Like I literally, my second card was a hive of giant ants that like decimated the few starting dwarves I had. So it was off to a rough start there. So, but it's very much procedural, and you sort of roll with the punches, right? I do really love that idea of like building out a space. It's not, you're not journaling. I mean, you can. There are some suggestions that you could have a secondary journal and literally describing your finds. I'm just doing the actual sketching out of the map. It is a little fiddly in terms of trying to track resources and what units you have and where they are. So it's very much interested in the same concepts of Dwarf Fortress and being very simulationist and all these moving pieces. Like if you dig into into water or gas, like there are rules for that water flowing through the rest of your cavern and destroying areas, or gas rising up and suffocating your dwarves. And I haven't hit that yet. I do appreciate there's like very early on it says rule one: if you're unsure, just do whatever sounds appropriate, right? And I think you really have to be like, I'm sure if you're a veteran to these games, you know that's fair game. But personally, like I like to try and stick to the rules as much as possible, but sometimes you just got to know when to just roll with it, keep the momentum going rather than overthinking it. And so I am enjoying that. It's this nice, another sense of creativity without having to actually write and journal. And you get a cool map and dwarves at the end. You can put as much effort into as you want. You can get really elaborate and sketch out each room individually, or just like slap down, or you literally just write the name. It's a crystal cavern. Done.
Two things. So your mention just now of water and gas just is giving me like traumatic memories of Oxygen Not Included,
Oh yeah,
which
on like
those
Minecraft.
those two things literally happen. Is if you
Yes.
crack into a water vein, it could come spilling over and drowning your people. And if you get gas, you can ruin the environment
Well, speaking of
of
giant ants,
your
it very much
cavern.
does feel like an ant farm. You've got the 2D
Yeah.
sort of profile of this dungeon that you're digging down into.
Yeah, it's so evocative. I too am very interested in that game. And the other thing is, while you and I have been talking about putting together like a little library of our
Mm.
zines, of our RPG books, because you and I are both very interested in those these days. And I was spending a little bit of time putting together a spreadsheet, which maybe we'll share for some people to just look at if they're curious at some point in the future, if they're as nerdy as we are. And I noticed that I actually own Delve, for one,
Oh, there
and
you
I
go.
own two other games in that author's sort of series,
Yeah.
oeuvre. It's
Umbra and Rise,
right.
I think they're called.
It's Blackwell Writer, or at least that's their
And a Blackwell is a
tag.
designer.
Right. So
Mm.
the tag is backrellwriter.itch.io is where I own the books in digital form. So yeah, Delve is probably the original. And then there's one called Rise, which is a game of spreading evil. So it's described as it's the evil sister of Delve, essentially.
Dungeon
So
Keeper, basically, I guess.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other game, you're right, is called Umbra, and this is a solo game of Final Frontiers. So it looks
Sci-fi.
like you're building out a sci-fi colony, much more like Oxygen Not Included.
Yeah, I'm quite enjoying it. It is designed to, or it's suggested at least that you can then use these dungeons as inspiration for your actual like a dungeon to go exploring in another like Dungeons and Dragons, for example.
Right.
It's a generative process as you're working through this. I believe there is talk of a new sort of re-release of the original game coming out next year.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that reminds me, by the way, the game Cairn I was just talking about, I was reading the first edition. There was a second edition that maybe just came out recently. So be aware of that. And the other mechanism I forgot to mention was that this game does something which I like a lot of some indie RPGs are doing lately is that they have a kind of like a point-based inventory limit. So characters can have like 10 points of equipment and specific things fill up those slots. Basically, you have like equipment slots, kind of like you're playing like a Resident Evil video game or something like that, or like some of the original Baldur's Gate, the PC game. You can slot items on specific body parts.
Diablo.
Right. Yeah, classic. Like those old school style games. And the cool thing is like if you're a wizard and you cast spells, you actually like give yourself fatigue, which occupies those inventory slots. So like that's why you're sort of a glass cannon, is because you can do powerful things, but you cannot equip yourself with a lot of equipment or carry lots of loot because you are too fatigued from.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a very cool system. So much exciting stuff out there.
Maybe one day we'll get to play them.
Got to do it because we keep talking about it, and we got to actually eat our vegetables here.
Well, speaking of which, I did ask on Blue Sky recently for recommendations for two-player role-playing games. You both have a few solo options, and games obviously work better with larger groups, but not many for just two. I did get a couple of suggestions I need to look into, but if you have any recommendations, please do reach out.
Most certainly, and we already know about a couple, like that Rogue Zone I was talking about the other day, and I am very interested in playing Ironsworn.
Yes.
And Ironsworn Starforged is the other one, which can be played GM-less, solo or cooperative. So very excited about playing that.
Excellent. Well, shall we bring it home?
Let's do it. Like we had no problem filling out an hour. Had nothing to worry about. All right. Yeah, let's definitely wrap that up. That's what we played this last week. And of course, this was our playlist episode. And next episode, we're going to be talking about one featured game. And what game is that going to be, Daniel?
That is Senua's Saga Hellblade 2. And possibly the first one. I have not had time to replay that yet.
Yeah, so I lied. We're probably going to be talking about two games there. I just finished Senua's Sacrifice, the first one, last night.
Okay.
No, the night before, and I just started Senua's Saga, the second one, last night. So I did back to back.
Cool. Great.
That's how I'm going to play it. So please, if you've played those games before or are curious about those games, please send us your feedback. You can reach out to us by various means that Daniel is going to tell us about.
Those means you can reach us at omnigamersclub@gmail.com or at our website, omnigamers.club, if you have any questions or comments or games you'd like to see us play through.
That's right. And check us out on YouTube. We post our videos there, or subscribe to us in our podcatcher and a podcatcher of your choosing. And of course, we'd love to hear your feedback. Leave comments, leave likes, subscribe, please, all that sort of stuff. Tell a friend if you think they might be interested in the types of games you cover. And thanks so much for all the subscribers. People have been adding us to starter packs on Blue Sky recently. I'm sure it's not just us. It's the whole Blue Sky, rising waters, lifts all boats sort of thing. But we've noticed. So
skies are blue at Blue Sky. So yeah, the water's great. Come join us there. Lots of chatter going on. And you can catch all of our announcements and updates over there. So you can find us at Blue Sky, or you can find me at Board Game Feast at Blue Sky.
Yep, and I'm Omnigamer Mark on Blue Sky as well. So yeah, it's been lovely talking to you, and let's talk some Hellblade next week.
For sure. Well, remember everyone to have a balanced diet of games. Thanks for listening.
That's right. Bye.
Bye.